How do we get to the point where we are not controlled by the ego, but handle every situation, positive, negative, good, bad, easy, hard, with wisdom and grace? Return your attention to the present moment continuously. Look at what is now, so that problems don't proliferate in your mind. Bring it back to what is now. What's the situation now? Is there anything I can do? But before you do anything, become friendly with the present moment. That in itself is the beginning of the end of the ego. Become friendly with the present moment. Align yourself to it so that you don't have an argument with the isness of life. Can you imagine the insanity of arguing with what is? But it shouldn't be, but it is. But it shouldn't be, but it is. But of course, the moment you say it shouldn't be, this shouldn't be happening, he shouldn't behave like that, they should have done that, but of course they didn't. Many things should have happened. I shouldn't have to do this, I'm doing it, but I shouldn't have to do this, but I'm doing it. What a horrible way to live. So, should the arguing with the isness of life, that's a form of insanity, but it's normal. Often in the past I've said normal equals insane. It's a slight, but it's still basically true. So you come to an acceptance of whatever arises in your experience. Accept your experience of this moment. Don't argue with your experience of this moment. Accept that this is what you might experience. Irritation. Now, if you experience irritation about something that's happening at this moment, that means initially you were not totally aligned with the present moment. There was something in you that reacted. A thought probably would come in. Why is this? They should know better. Why do they keep people waiting here? Why do they? Irritation arises. And so then irritation becomes your experience of this moment. So you missed your first chance of immediately accepting the isness of this moment, the situation you are in. Accepting doesn't mean you cannot take action. It means the basis for everything. Sometimes action is necessary or possible. But let the action come out of a prior oneness with the present moment, so that the action is not reactive, but is an intelligent, wise response to the situation, not coming out of the conditioning of your mind. So, becoming friendly with the present moment. If you miss your first chance, some kind of emotion will arise, certain thoughts will arise, telling you how bad this situation is, that it shouldn't be, but it is, all kinds of things. Then you have a second chance. Your second chance is to notice the irritation that has arisen in you and to accept that you are irritated. Okay, let me be, because that becomes your experience of the present moment. Now, what do you do with that? Then it's your second chance of accepting the present moment. So you accept that you are irritated. Let me be irritated then. That means the irritation cannot survive very long in you. Especially if you don't feed it anymore with your thoughts, you just notice it living in you, has taken up temporary residence in you, and then you accept. You said you feel irritated. Acceptance dissolves negative states, unpleasant states very quickly. That's a very strange thing. Let's say you're unhappy. Unhappy is a generic term. It could mean many things. But let's just use it. Let's say you're unhappy. You feel, oh, yeah, there's a mood or whatever it is, an unhappy mood. You're taken over. It's amazing how humans get taken over by moods. They don't know where they come from. It could start with a thought in your mind about some negative thought about somebody, and then it creates another, and then the mood arises. Or you may wake up with a mood, and the first thing you say to your family is, "Don't talk to me." If you can say, "I'm in a bad mood," that already means there's a little bit of consciousness there. At least you know that you're in a bad mood. The most unconscious people are so trapped in their bad mood that they don't know it, they simply act it out. That's horrible. So anybody can say, "Don't talk to me, I'm in a bad mood." Okay, at least there's some consciousness there in this person. You're not totally insane if you know that you're insane. But if you don't know you're insane, then you're truly insane. Knowing that you're insane means there is some awareness there, if only in the background. You're not totally lost. So a mood comes on, and you're trapped. And then the question is, at what point does the witnessing faculty arise in you, the awareness that is able to witness or to observe the mood that you're in, and knows, rather than you being identified with the mood is recognized as an energy field in you of heaviness. And then you say, well, that's what I'm experiencing right now. And you accept that. And you would see, if that's the case, how quickly it actually dissolves. It makes, at least for a while, I don't know how quickly, it depends how dense or heavy the mood is. But the important thing is, when you witness it, you no longer feed it with your thinking. In the absence of awareness, this mood, let's say it's some kind of dark mood today with the pain body. Pain body, as most of you probably know, means accumulated old emotion and energy that still lives in you from the past, and occasionally it resurfaces and tries to feed on further experience of pain because it loves its pain. So it says to your partner, "Please give me pain. I'm going to make you so uncomfortable that you're going to give me pain. That's what I want. I love the drama. I want it, I need it. Please give me drama," says the pain body. And then it starts. That's another story. So the mood comes, and you notice it. You witness it. Then it cannot rise up into your mind and control your thinking, because in the absence of awareness, a mood comes upon you and immediately rises up into your mind and makes you think what it wants to think, and all the thoughts will be deeply negative about yourself, about your life, about other people, about the world, everything in general, whatever it may be, it's all horrible. And so people get trapped in that, in the absence of awareness. Energy fields can take you over. Emotional energy fields. You can even attract energy fields from the unseen that are deeply negative in the absence of awareness. You're alone, waiting for the elevator, and immediately there's always temptation to fill this moment up with something. Some people cannot tolerate being alone in a room and not be doing anything. Because all that thinking knows is through concepts, thoughts. From the point of view of the egoic self, it requires courage not to run away internally, so to speak, and to seek refuge again in thinking, not to run away when you touch that dimension of no thought, pure awareness. The egoic self, of course, is afraid of that. So in the moment of transition, there could be fear. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know anything anymore. And yet there is a deep knowing in that, but it's non-conceptual. You know yourself very deeply, but not through any concepts. Yet this gnosis, direct knowing. You know your being. And again, when I talk about it, I say you know your being, you know yourself. There's a duality which doesn't actually exist. It's only when we talk about it, it's there. You're constantly challenged when you go back into the world. Well, this is the world too, but your usual world. You're constantly challenged by the world. To lose yourself in stuff, in things, in objects, in thoughts. Ultimately, it all boils down to the mind. And you're being bombarded. That's the challenge. To stay present, even when you're bombarded with all kinds of extremely important things that you need to give immediate attention to. It's amazing how lost humans are, most humans, lost in their minds, which is the world. And even when they go for walks, I've seen people walking in the forest with things on their headphones. I don't know what they're listening to. Music, perhaps. Or talk by Eckhart. But when you're out in nature, let go of that. When you find yourself alone, no matter where, the temptation immediately arises to fill that moment up with something. Whether you are alone in your room, or whether you are alone sitting somewhere, maybe you're in a cafe and sitting in a waiting room somewhere, airport, doctor's office. You're alone waiting for the elevator, and immediately there's always temptation to fill this moment up with something. Some people cannot tolerate being alone in a room and not be doing anything. There's something missing, as they say. In the past, you had opportunities that you could pick up a newspaper, or you could turn on the radio or the television, and some people do that immediately the moment they get home. Just can't tolerate silence, or you can be completely in your mind and say, you're not even there, you just, let's do something, But nowadays you're not confined to the radio or the television. The most obvious thing that you interact with is your devices. Any moment, when you have a moment of being somewhere, almost all humans these days, they get out their phone in order to clutter their mind. Of course, sometimes it's helpful. Sometimes there is an important message. Sometimes it's good to be able to communicate with someone. But a lot of the time, it's no more than clutter, totally not just unnecessary, but extremely harmful. It takes away, continuously obscures presence, clutters your mind more than it ever was the case in the past, when it was already cluttered. And it's an addiction. So be conscious of that, so that you learn to enjoy a period of being alone without necessarily doing anything, filling this moment up with something. As the famous French philosopher said, perhaps I think it was Pascal, he said, all the troubles of humanity are due to humans' inability to sit quietly in a room. That seems at first an exaggeration, or to say all the troubles of humanity are due to a human inability to sit quietly in a room. If you don't look more deeply, it seems, well, that can't be true. But what does that mean? The inability to sit quietly in a room means to have lost touch completely with the dimension of being. And that is the cause for all the troubles of humanity. Even Pythagoras already 2,600 years ago said, the reason for all your problems and troubles is you are disconnected from yourself. See? But even then it was already happening, but not to such an extreme degree as now. And this is not just something that, on an individual level, it's vitally important because it brings a dimension to your life that is the only place where fulfillment can be found. And true, I'm reluctant to use the word happiness, because it's deeper than happiness. So it frees you from suffering on an individual level. But as far as civilization is concerned, if the bulk of the population has lost touch with that, doesn't even have a glimpse anymore of it, millions of humans have no access, it seems, to the spiritual dimension, totally reduced to being consumers and believing in certain ideologies, being completely conditioned by the surrounding culture, except people like you. Because traditionally, access to the spiritual dimension, to the transcendent dimension, to the being, traditionally access was given by the traditional religions. Now, in many cases, religions degenerated to a tool of the human ego. They were misused more and more by the human ego for power and control. That's true. They degenerated into ideologies that you could identify with, and then anybody who didn't exactly share your belief system in every detail would immediately become your enemy, and you could kill them. Completely insane. And yet, even though that happened, and that is the case, there was still a tiny opening left within all the religions. And some religions became more egoically restricted than others. Christianity very strongly. In Islam also, there's a tendency for coming into the service of strengthening the human ego instead of liberating from the human ego. But there's always some opening is there still, even though all this has happened in the great religions, all of them, there is still a small opening into the transcendent dimension. A tiny bit of light still coming through for humans. Even, let's say, you go to church every Sunday, and it's just a cultural thing, or you have to do it because you don't want to belong, and it doesn't. And then and yet maybe they read the words of Jesus and, in a very boring way, usually. Look at the flowers of the field, how they spin not, neither do they weave, and yet Solomon, in all his glory, is not attired, one of these, be in the present moment. Well. And yet there could be something can still filter through, a little bit of light coming through the old structures. And then in Christianity you look at the cross, or in Catholic you look at the man on the cross, and perhaps you're going through intense suffering at that moment. And it could happen that you look at the suffering of the archetypal. I call Jesus the archetypal human. You look at the suffering entity, and you begin to identify with that figure on the cross. Not believe in, that seems a bit superficial, but if you identify with, you become it. And that could take you to deep acceptance, and the deep acceptance can bring about the opening into the spiritual dimension, surrender, no longer letting go of all resistance. And then it could become an opening into the divine, the cross. Because the cross points to the fact of suffering, but it's also a symbol for the divine, dual nature, suffering and resurrection or awakenings through suffering. It's all there, not explained verbally, because people wouldn't have understood if that had been explained to them verbally. They're all concepts, but just to see that, I mean, the central teaching in Buddhism is dukkha, and the Buddha summarized his teaching as, I teach suffering and the end of suffering. And the central image of Christianity is a man who is suffering and who then dies and is born again. But now there are millions of humans for whom the old religions, especially in the Western world, in parts of the East too, those religions become totally meaningless. So they've thrown out, do you know the expression, the baby and the bathwater? So they reject things that seem a bit childish in these old religions, all those elements. Even the concept of God is a bit childish in the traditional sense, a man with a beard, a guy with a beard, who controls things but allows people to suffer. This is a very childish view of God, and because of that, they don't believe in that anymore, but they cannot see the deeper meaning that is still hiding behind all that, so they throw out the baby with the bathwater. I don't know where the expression, somebody must have started it somewhere. I don't know how nobody would ever throw out the baby with the bathwater. I suppose what it implies is the bathwater is dirty and it needs to go, but the baby is precious. But you don't throw them out together. So now millions of humans have no access, it seems, to the spiritual dimension, totally reduced to being consumers and believing in certain ideologies, being completely conditioned by the surrounding culture, except people like you who are able to go deeper. It's still a relative minority. What the percentage is, I don't know. Depends from country to country and so on. People who are actually awakening. So if anybody who is practitioner of any traditional religion here, no matter what it is, Hinduism, Judaism, Islam, Christianity, whatever it may be, it's very easy if you don't need to abandon it. You just go deep enough to see the truth that's still hiding at the core of it. Or if you've become so disenchanted with your religion because of your upbringing or whatever, then you could leave it behind, and then you go more deeply. If it becomes a hindrance rather than a help, then you would put it aside, because religion is no more than a vehicle